So the goal today, as we look at this topic, is to set a foundation. As we talk about smart apartments, we're going to give a really good breakdown of all the technologies that are within the smart home and smart apartment ecosphere. And to help us do that today, I'd like to introduce Lisa Moore. So Lisa, could you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role and about your company?
Yes, hi, my name is Lisa Moore. I'm with JPI. We are a design, build, own firm based in Dallas-Fort Worth area with another division in Southern California. I've been in the construction business for about a little over 20 years, right out of college, and done everything from condos to multifamily to hospitality. Last couple of years concentrating on multifamily. And we had created this role, Director of Design Innovation at JPI, really to dive into the smart apartment world and kind of navigate it ourselves instead of going to others to tell us what to do. And it's definitely been a long journey and fun journey. And I'm excited to share some of that with you today.
So expand just a little bit on design, own, build. I mean, most of you probably know, but how is that unique, what you do at JPI?
Being in construction for so long, to me, it's the best of all worlds. If you're just in the construction world, you basically have to build what you're given. Every day, we re-innovate how we want to do business. So if I'm on a job site one day and I see that something's not working, and we want to immediately change that, I can go back to our design department and quickly change 10, 15 jobs that are in design and say, we don't want this here, we need to do this instead. So that's a pretty exciting way to do business. We don't have to wait for 3 more years for hopefully something to trickle down. And we can make, being the owner, we can make some pretty good on-site decisions, which has been very effective. And we do have partners, investor partners, but they come to us because we kind of know what we're doing a lot of times, or at least we're experimenting. So that's very exciting just to be able to be on the design side. We have our own internal architects, but they don't do production. We outsource the production to architects. Our architects internally are the basically owner's reps for the projects. And then we have our own construction department with a certain number of people assigned to each project.
So I recognize that this type of model may not apply to many of you, but we do think it's relevant because to be able to kind of control your own destiny allows Lisa to be able to talk a little bit about what is on the cutting edge. Now, before we look at what I already told her, I'm going to steal this model that she shared that lays out the ecosphere. I'd like to introduce another model called the Kano scoring model. So this particular model was introduced by Dr. Noriaki Kano decades ago. And the reason I want to introduce it today is it helps companies be able to prioritize features that they want to implement within their product. And it can be very general, but it applies to what we're talking about today. And it prioritizes based on 2 dimensions. The first dimension is on how well can we satisfy or delight our customers. That's what we're all trying to do. And the second dimension it looks at is how much investment is required in order to be able to delight the customer. So using those 2 dimensions, we're going to create a little 2x2 consultant grid with satisfaction being our vertical axis, investment being our horizontal axis. And we're going to draw 3 different lines on here that represent 3 different types of products and how we can categorize potential products that we are looking to put into our pipeline and potentially deploy to our buildings. So the first one here at the bottom we're going to call basic. And notice particularly the curve, is that as investment increases, the amount of satisfaction is disproportionately growing smaller. As you put more investment in, you kind of get less and less return on that. Unfortunately, some of these features are ones that customers expect and that you just have to provide. They're table stakes, although you really would prefer not to, you just have to, and you're not going to get as much delight out of it versus customer expects it. The second feature category goes linearly from the bottom left quadrant to the top right quadrant. And notice this one, as you add investment, delight increases. But it is a proportionate increase. And these are features that we'll call performance. Now again, these are ones that you may still have to provide, but you should be able to recognize by their cost structure that they fall within the performance category. You think of like an app, that if I need to provide my customer 10 gigabytes of storage versus 20 gigabytes of storage versus 30, there is a proportional increase in cost to me as I continue to add that. And I'm sure you can think of things you have to provide in your buildings that have that type of cost structure, that if I have to provide more, I have to spend more, it's proportionate. That would be considered a performance feature. The last one that we're going to look at has this curve in the opposite direction of the basic features, and that is an exciter feature. And it disproportionately increases that exciter satisfaction dimension with less and less investment. These are the type of features that if you can find them and identify them, you can provide more bang for your buck. Your customers are more excited about them, even though you don't have to pay as much proportionally for them. So using this as a framework, and notice that all three of these, there's nothing here that says we're not going to do it. And certainly there are some features where you will decide you're not going to do it. But all three of these are ones that you probably are going to have to do, but at least understanding which bucket they go into, understanding which ones are basics and that I've just got to do, just got to bite the bullet and do it. Performance, at least understanding that, okay, it's going to go linearly, whichever, as I expand this particular feature. But trying to find exciters, and when you recognize an exciter and see that the customers are really excited about it and that you don't have to pay as much, those are ones you want to move on and prioritize higher above the others and get to faster because of the results you get. So using this framework, we're now going to go in and dive into this framework of the ecosystem, and we'll kind of pause occasionally, come back to this, and we'll ask Lisa's feedback on what she thinks within this particular part of the ecosphere are some basic features, what are some performance features, what are some exciter features. So that's the plan. Okay, so here is the model, and this is a little bit of an eye check, I know. We're going to break down each of these areas into more detail, but I'll let you explain what we see here. You can go into as much detail as you want for the first pass, and we'll go into more detail as we dive into each section.
So this is a lot of information, and this is actually something I put together when I first joined JPI and started in this kind of area and kind of what I knew, and then I've updated it recently, knowing what I know now. There's definitely some little things that you can add, but I want to say overall, this is a pretty good chart, and I literally give this to my vendors and pre-con department, and it helps kind of give them some direction on what we work on in the smart building area. It is a lot of information. I could literally spend 4 days and talk about this chart, but I want to do very high level because I think a lot of the different vendors are here in these different areas, and so it's good for you to kind of know some high level information. It was good that Brandon mentioned a little bit about JPI's background. We do, I would say right now we have maybe 75% of our portfolio is market rate, and those are typically no more than a 2-year hold. However, last year we got into the affordable low-income tax credit projects, and those are 15-year holds. So that has definitely reframed some of how we think about long-term management, which has been beneficial. But also retrofit. A lot of people that I speak with, don't have the opportunities that we do in new construction to put items behind the wall, like bulk Wi-Fi, to create kind of network and infrastructure. So please know that when I speak, I usually speak on the terms of new construction, but a lot of this information can be applied in retrofit situations. Just I might be able to do it a little easier on the new construction side. I want to start with, it might be good to have a visual. In the middle here, this all bases around your property management software. You have three big ones out there, your Yardi, your Entrata, Real Pages software. Those are kind of your three big ones. So that's kind of in the middle box. What I have encircling that box is what we call Smart Building Operating System. Now that's kind of down the road, definitely something that we're testing right now. There's a couple of those companies and vendors here, but that's definitely not a must-have. It's definitely kind of a wish list for a lot of people, and I'll explain why it's important, but there's definitely more important basic items on the Kano model that we'll talk about first, but everything does center around that, because when you talk about software and hardware and technology, it's all about integration. And so you can't necessarily just blindly make decisions on products independently, because it's all about what talks to what, who talks to who. So we'll get into that a little deeper. I want to start with access control. Access control, by far, is the most basic, what I would call the most basic to start with when it comes to smart building or smart apartments. I broke this down into 4 different areas because these are your really main 4 points of access. The 2 most important are going to be your unit locks and your common area access, which is typically your card readers, keypads. Those by far are kind of, your basics I would put on the Kano model. Aside from that, you've got vehicle gates and you've got your telephone entry systems. You might see a little bit of talk about telephone entry systems going away, but I am definitely a firm believer in them here to stay for a while. I think they still have a place in this market. And when I say that, you'll have companies like Chirp, for instance, that do QR code entries and take away your traditional telephone entry video system. But I personally like the sense of arrival that you get with the telephone entry system, like Butterflies. We use a lot of Butterfly products. Being on the wall at a lobby or a main entrance, people understand what a telephone entry system is, and that says, okay, this is a door that's an entry. That's going to give me information to get into this building. So I'm still behind your traditional telephone entry system, and there's some really cool products out there, especially like companies like Butterfly are doing with the video, even facial recognition, stuff that may creep some people out, but I think is very cool in the technology world.
How does the QR code work? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so instead of having your traditional video telephone entry system or any telephone entry system on a door, you would come up and there would just be signage at an entry point, and it would say, if you're a guest and would like to enter, scan this QR code. It can work a couple different ways depending on the vendor, but a guest would arrive, they would scan the QR code, and there's different types of transactions that can occur, but basically it would give you...
that takes them to a web-based app where they're then answering information or entering a number.
It could be already, they might be on a pre-approved list to get in, and it would just buzz them in. There'd be an option to buzz them in. Or maybe it's going to act as a telephone entry, and that QR code says, okay, this is the resident that I would like to visit, and then it sends a text message to that resident. That resident can then buzz them in. There's multiple different ways that can work. So that's getting away altogether from the telephone entry system and just offering the QR code. It's really cool. It's technology. Telephone entry systems require wiring and sometimes reoccurring fees. So there is definitely some pros to the QR codes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now you have to do none of that wiring. You're basically, everything's in the cloud and the person brings their own device.
Right, so you still have some sort of access device that's gonna let you into that door, but you don't have to have that additional device. But again, I love the traditional telephone entry system, so not completely sold. I actually use both systems right now, so I use them depending on where it is and what I need, who I need, what user I need to get into that door and that particular entrance. I might have a telephone entry versus a QR code. Vehicle gates, it's not sexy, but it's important, it's relevant. I will touch on this throughout kind of talking about everything, but as a goal for us, We want to achieve a one database, one platform where management doesn't have to go to multiple different softwares to enter residents' information and control that data. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, how everything circles around your property management software. You want software that ties into your property management software because that is your golden database of residents in that building. And then on top of that is the smart building operating system that needs to speak to that property management.
How many of you have challenges with multiple databases that you're trying to coordinate, or when you onboard a new resident, you have to do it in both? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's still some of that. I mean, you could talk about having 5 different platforms versus we want to try to get to, as few as possible, and that would be one. It's still a little challenging right now with the technology that's on the market, but that's our goal.
Sure.
Vehicle gates, it's not, like, again, nothing sexy. I am trying to move away from some of your standard long-range readers for the vehicle gates. I would love to do license plate readers, but I'm testing some software right now to make sure that that doesn't cause more hassle than needed, but there's some cool technology out there. And the reason I say that is because that's a separate database that you also have to control with a different credential. In Texas, we use toll tags, and so we actually use TransCore, which is one of the more expensive readers, but we use that as a resident, basically just so it's easy for them not to have, because the toll tags, you just have to have a sticker in your window, and it allows you to go throughout the tolls in the city. So we use the same system in our buildings mostly. So we don't have to have the resident to get another toll tag. We can actually use their...
read what that
yeah,
one
well,
is.
you can read exactly, input that same toll tag. But again, it's another credential, it's another database, so I'm trying to eliminate that database when possible, or at least have it sync into your property management software.
It seems like the license plate readers are getting a lot better. I do a
They are.
subscription-based car wash service that I go in, reads my license plate, and up goes the arm, and I go, and I've never had any problems with it over the last few years. So
yes, there is. I'm vetting a few different technologies right now, but that's where I'd like to move to, just to get rid of. I mean, you really want to get as few credentials as possible in the resident's hand. So that's, I would say that's pretty high level. Access control, again, if I were to do kind of anything, even in a retrofit, I would do smart locks, electronic locks on a resident door. It's not cheap, but I would say you kind of get your bang for your buck on that one. From the resident standpoint, we pretty much, it's just kind of a standard for us on our JPI package. We would never do mechanical keys or go back to that. We do still have some mechanical keys on property for back-of-house doors. But I'm trying to move. If I could get rid of all mechanical keys, I will, because there's a whole nother hassle from the management side. And I
think you'll hear that theme come up across multiple sessions of how access control and the lot of benefits that provides. So we'll hear more about that.
And kind of touching base real quick, and then we can jump, because I know we won't have that many minutes per session. You're supposed to give me a timer.
Oh, you're doing good.
I can talk all day on this stuff. So jumping over to our affordable, I can't do anything fun on affordable just because our budgets, as you can imagine, are super tight. But I ran the numbers a year ago, and traditionally affordable is just mechanical keys. So we did not implement smart or just electronic locks. You don't even have to call it smart. You can just call it an electronic lock. We didn't do that for the resident experience, other than just for management's sake alone. We ran the numbers, and it was such an enormous amount of savings every year, not having to do the key track systems, and the time alone from management having to go and rekey everything, lost keys. It was such a nightmare, and so we put that model on paper, and I was able to show such a significant savings on management side that I was able to get approved on the affordable projects to do all electronic door locks. So
just get a feel for adoption curve here in the room. How many of you still have manual keys? Okay, a few, but more than half, it looks like, have moved on. Great.
Yeah, and there's another conversations you guys can have about smart locks and BLE technology, Bluetooth technology, all different types of ways to enter and access those unit locks. That can be a whole other conversation, but it's good just to ask questions when it comes to smart locks. They're not all equal.
So looking at this part of the ecosystem, what would you identify as what you think is the exciter that's either already here or that is on the horizon?
So I would say basic being just having the electronic locks. The exciter would probably be going into mobile entry. There's a big push in the lock industry to get away from fobs and just have access completely on your phone. I'm not in that camp. I'm in the camp of still giving a fob to the residents. Your phone dies. You have a senior population perhaps, there is still several solid reasons why you shouldn't take a fob out of the hands of your residents. So, but there's some really cool stuff in technology and getting mobile access on your phone. People just love it. They don't have to dig in their purse for their keys these days, and they can just get up to it. Either there's a couple different ways to enter, but I would say that's kind of
I've loved over the last, and I think the pandemic definitely kind of pushed this faster than it probably would have happened otherwise, but going to hotels where you can register and get your room key on your phone, and I definitely see if it's right there, it's on the edge.
Convenience. Yes. And I think it's going to be expected more and more, definitely from the residents.
Okay, next section, we're going to kind of work clockwise around our diagram. This one's pretty complicated. Tell us about unit devices.
It's actually less complicated to me because there's a lot of additional squares. So this includes unit devices, which we have in yellow. And then I actually, even though I have another section called utilities, there are several utilities that actually go into the unit, but I kind of keep them in different categories. So the ones in purple are in our utility section, but obviously they are technically unit devices. So I will start with the top and kind of go down. I try to put these in some sort of decent order. Smart thermostats, by far, on market rate projects are hands down. The ROI is probably the best ROI that you'll ever see when it comes to lease up and control, well, particularly for new construction, right? Because it takes us, 18 or so months, depending on the day and age is a little shorter, to actually get 80% occupancy or more. Smart thermostats is just, again, another time saver, lifesaver for your maintenance guy, not having to go around to every single unit and adjust the thermostat because the weather's changing. So you can do some cool mass manipulation stuff, which ties into your smart building operating system. You need that software to control those smart thermostats. So there's kind of twofold. You can do smart thermostats by themselves. It's a cool feature on the app for your residents. Pretty much a lot of residents just expect that these days from us. Then you can go the next step further, which is bringing in a smart building operating system that can do what I call mass manipulation. So a manager or maintenance guy could be sitting at his desk and say, I want all the vacant units to go to 72 degrees. You know, it's going to be hot or cold tomorrow. And so that saves him, our average building is 380 units. So that's a huge time savings instead of walking around, unlocking every single door and manipulating, manually changing the temperature in each one.
I mean, you technically could have someone who's doing that for multiple buildings.
Yeah, it could be a full-time job during lease up. Right. And in Texas, we have crazy temperature swings. So we have everything from 100-degree days to freezing snow weather. So we're changing thermostats a lot during lease up. But on the resident side alone, again, it's kind of just one of those IoT devices that they are beginning just to expect. Again, it depends on the market. Every market is different, but Dallas-Fort Worth is, I think, a pretty well-educated and prominent market. And so it's very common in a lot of our new construction sites. From there, there's like this whole space of unit devices, and I am constantly looking at new things that we can do in there. But I would say for our standard package, smart thermostats, a lighting control. Usually we're only doing one, and we're usually doing it in the common area, a living room or your dining or kitchen area, and some sort of dimmer light switch. That's a smart controller. If you don't have a smart building operating system, those, again, are products that can just come with their own apps, and so it's still very easy for the resident. We are working on smart building operating systems where they all come into one app, which is the convenience of that type of product. But again, that's kind of like a high wish list for a lot of properties. Leviton probably makes some of the best product in this space right now. One of my biggest hurdles is I keep pushing Leviton to create a fan light switch combo, smart switch, and they don't. They have a light, and they have a fan switch. And so that's, I've been pushing them for the last year, so I'm hoping that maybe in the next year I can maybe get some movement. They are probably one of the biggest players in the lighting business in the multifamily space that are pushing some pretty good products. So that was,
for some reason, I think we didn't get that on there. I think we might have them on the
the
utilities. But no, and just a disclaimer, the logos you see on here are certainly not comprehensive.
No.
Many of them are here as sponsors. Not all of them are. If there were some that we felt like were pretty big players in the space that aren't here, we still added them. And it's entirely possible that we missed some that should have been on there that,
yes.
If so, we apologize.
Yes, definitely. But lighting, everyone says, why don't you do lighting, smart dimmers in every room? But that gets expensive. I mean, your typical smart dimmer is going to be running you $30 to $40 depending on what you're buying and the quantity, and every dollar counts in these units. So right now we're not doing them in the bedrooms and every room. I'm really just doing them right now. I think eventually one day that will get there, and maybe that's an upgrade option you can offer. Definitely good for retrofits. We do kind of put multiple lighting dimmers in some of our pilot units and test to see what someone will pay extra for. But it's really not that feasible to do entire smart lighting package.
Gotcha.
It's not in my budget, at least. I haven't gotten that approved.
Not yet.
Next down the line, appliances. This is new. I would say LG's, I think, one of the big players in this space right now. We're not doing smart appliances, but there is a push for that in this space. I am watching that. I'm not doing it because it's also not in our budget to do LG appliances. I think there's going to be some cool technology that comes along with either fridges and your washers and dryers. If something gets tripped, power goes out, it sends the resident a notification, hey, your power's out, your fridge has been down for an hour, or whatever it might be. There's some cool maybe technology that's coming and that has a space. There aren't enough, to me, manufacturers right now that offer those products affordably for us. And then you have your typical standard other IoT devices. You could have shades. I would say window shades are a big one. We really do those in very particular units. Maybe they're penthouse units, maybe they're mezzanine levels. You have to pick and choose where you can do shades because they, again, are a different price point. And you can't, a lot of the smart building operating systems don't work with your third-party plug-in plugs, smart plugs. But right now, you'd have to actually get the already wired plugs. So I'm testing kind of, again, it's kind of an expensive upgrade, so we're looking at where we want to specifically have those and where they make the most sense.
So an earlier iteration of this had, like Alexa and Google had their own box, and now they've been downgraded into other IoT. You want to give some commentary on that?
So
I imagine there's a story.
I'm an Alexa Google user because I test a lot of different products. Alexa and Google, they're your command center. Leviton is actually doing some cool products with Alexa, so they're doing some switches themselves that have Alexa built in, which I'm testing some of those coming up in our pilot units. But really, your command center that we're testing is going to be the smart building operating system.
Gotcha.
So I would probably, I'm seeing some residents probably still tie in their Google to their devices, but then you kind of have competing operating systems command centers to tell the devices what to do. So they can still work, for sure.
But from your viewpoint, you want your operating system to be the ultimate arbiter of that. If you can get Alexa or Google to play nice, then you're happy to have your resident come in and bring them and hook them to all the things, but everything still needs to answer to the central operating system.
Yeah, kind of like our objective on the management side to have a one database. Our objective in the resident is to have a one app in their hand. We don't want an app for access control, an app for telephone entry, an app for Leviton, and an app for the appliances. We want one app go-to, because the last thing you want to do is have this app confusion, and no one has patience for that, right? Oh wait, where's my light switch? Which app is it in? I need to pull that up. So
or the apps fighting against each other to try to control.
Yeah, so that's where the smart building operating system comes in, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But that is the kind of command center, I would say, for a one-stop shop for the residents.
Okay. Tell us about the cousins down here, the purple utilities that are also unit devices.
Okay, so utilities. Again, smart thermostats to me kind of fall under the utility management. Smart water meters are big. We do smart water meters mostly on the billing side. It's relevant. However, I'm going to use this a couple different times probably throughout this conversation. What I'm excited about in this smart building space is the gamification that we can do, and that it's not a lot of people are talking about, but it's something that we're going to be testing soon. So gamification can be applied to a lot of things, but we want resident interaction. We want them to continue to be interested in using that app, because eventually we want that app to be a communication portal to the management. We want to be able to send notices there. We want them to be able to do their billing there. We want it to be an engagement source. So gamification is, for instance, in smart water meters, the resident can see how much water they're using. Mm-hmm. And perhaps we do some sort of gamification that will hopefully tie into the smart building operating system.
So either a Hall of Fame or a Wall of Shame, saying whether they're the best users or the worst users, exactly. And hopefully encourage some better usage.
And kind of on the green side, right? Encourage your residents to be more eco-friendly and say, maybe I shouldn't take that 20-minute shower anymore, and this is the impact I have. And so that's kind of the gamification, and how am I doing with everybody else in the building or everybody else on the floor?
Yeah, if you don't do the top 10 or worst 10, you can at least say, am I above average or below average, to give a viewpoint. And those that aren't familiar with gamification, that is looking for ways to be able to take what are arguably learning principles, but turn them into some type of scoreboard or a game or streaks to get people to engage more with what that particular item is. It's used quite a bit in education, and certainly as we see more and more of the upcoming generation used to and conditioned to some of the gamification of the social media apps and et cetera, try to pull those over to do some good.
Right, absolutely. So we're starting that now on a project and playing around with the green scores for your water. Leviton does a load panel in the units, and so I'm about to install some of those and test those. So that would be gamification of the power usage, which is even bigger, which will be fun. So some of your smart building operating systems are thinking about this and working on it in the background. There aren't a lot that have this gamification model really ironed out yet. So it's kind of exciting I'm kind of pushing them on from the management side. Like also you want that engagement with your resident, and you want to be able to reward them. Okay, you're the less bottom 10 or top 10, however you want to look at it, user of water and power this month, and we're going to give you some sort of gift card or something. You want that engagement to keep the resident happy and interactive in the community and to keep them there.
Okay, so wrapping up unit devices. And again, we'll probably just focus on all the exciters just because of time. What do you feel like is one of the items or technologies here that you are seeing as an exciter for your residents, or you think will be an exciter in the future as it gains further adoption?
So I would say, it doesn't sound exciting, but I would say your dimmer switches, your lighting is in the excitement factor. They just like that, accessibility to that. And then, obviously, the gamification, I think, is something fun. They haven't had it yet, so we're kind of working right now for that space. But that's kind of a fun exciter.
I don't know how feasible it is to start getting some of the LED lighting where you've got some color controls and stuff, but I know with my kids, it seems like they've kind of on their own have done a lot of stuff in just their own rooms to want to be able to control the colors, and I imagine that's becoming more popular. Again, the expense isn't too much, but infinite number of colors for a single price seems to fit into that definition of exciters.
Yeah, people want control.
Yeah. Okay, moving our way around the horn, we're kind of revisiting those cousins. We'll probably talk a few things about them. Is there anything else you want to add about the utilities portion?
So on this, not only do we do the smart thermostats in the units, we do them in the common areas, and that's just as relevant for the same reasons, to be able to control the common area maintenance, your budget, your OpEx for that side of the business. So we do smart thermostats throughout. I would say water sensors, that's a whole nother conversation. Water sensors can look like many things. Water sensors are probably really important on the retrofit side. I haven't come to a comfort level on the new construction side on water sensors, only on the ROI factor. So water sensors can get expensive depending on which device you're going to put them on. Is it the washing machine? Is it under the kitchen sink? Is it under the bathroom sink? Is it in the bathroom in general, by the toilet? Your places where you typically would have water leaks inside the unit. It can get expensive really fast to do sensors. I think the technology is great, and if we have a bucket of fun money to play with, those are definitely great devices to do on retrofits, because obviously those are more apt to have the water leak occurrences as opposed to new construction. Not that I've had several water leaks on new construction, so that happens, unfortunately.
I'm sure they were just as expensive as an old construction.
They're very expensive. Usually they're in the walls, and they're a whole other issue.
And we will hear more on that from one of the other panelists in the future, but definitely on the retrofit side,
yes.
and talking about
so
that.
I love the idea of them. I haven't come to a comfort level yet on the ROI for water sensors for new construction side. But there's some cool technology out there. Obviously that ties in with also shutting off your water, and not just an alarm going off where you don't have, time is of the essence when you have a water leak. So I've explored a lot of different items there, but if I have $200 or $300 more to spend on a new construction per unit, I'm definitely going to put it somewhere else.
Okay. I don't know if you had any basic performance or exciters in this area.
Let's see. I don't know how exciting utilities can be outside.
That's kind of what I suspected, but I thought at least
yeah, because these are really more management oriented and not necessarily exciters. I would say your maintenance guy might get excited about water sensors and shutoff valves, but not from the resident standpoint.
Gotcha. All right, so the next part of the ecosystem, this is one it's much more near and dear to my heart, having spent almost 2 decades in this industry, and particularly for me, I was a director of supply chain for a company in 2010 that was really on the forefront of doing video cameras and door locks and smart thermostats and plug controls, kind of mass market. Very early on. So tell us a little bit about what you've got here on the security side.
And I haven't really done this area justice just because it's at the bottom of my list of importance. I definitely have your basic CCTV on every site. In new construction, we only do intrusion alarms in our leasing office space, not in our individual units. So it just depends on the property. But I know ADT and Point Central and Alarm.com, they have a lot of products in the intrusion alarm area. They're doing some pretty cool stuff with on the resident side. Yep. It's just not necessarily what we do on new construction. I do beef up the security site to site, just depending on the location. If I'm having break-ins, or if I know it's maybe a little sketchier area, I might need to beef up on some of the intrusion alarms. But in general, for the resident units, we don't have those. But I say I don't do it justice because there are some other cool items kind of in this area. When it comes to security, you can just do a basic CCTV, camera system that just captures something. So if someone's car got broken into or someone's car got hit, you can go back and look to find that report for a police report. There are more active security items and CCTV. There's some cool CCTV options out there. Eagle Eye is one that comes off the top of my head that does some cool stuff that does start to integrate with some of your smart building operating systems that can say, okay, there's this sketchy guy in a green shirt walking around the property, and that software can literally go and find, not a sketchy guy, but they can go and find a guy in a green shirt. So they can do some cool facial recognition. So there are some really cool technology in that space that we don't really get to that level of security yet, but I've seen a lot of it out there, and I could see that being becoming more of a basic CCTV, as opposed to just throwing CCTV monitor in one of your back of house rooms and you only go visit it once every 6 months when something happens. We use our CCTV on the management side more so for making sure that our leasing agents and our property managers at their desk have that that dashboard of the most, vulnerable points of the building or the entry points into the building so they can see who's coming in to the beginning of the property. They probably use it more on a daily basis, so I try to set up our properties where it's really more of a benefit for them to kind of keep their eye on what's going on and what to expect. So there's some cool stuff in this area, but I haven't spent a lot of time.
Yeah, I still usually attend the International Security Convention each year in Las Vegas, and it's just fascinating to see with artificial intelligence and machine learning, some of the stuff that's coming down the pike and is getting more traction and more use, more so on the commercial side, but as those models get trained on the commercial side, they're eventually going to become more applicable and have a better ROI on the residential side. And yeah, like you said, of being able to, instead of having to search through hours and days and weeks of CCTV footage, kind of natural processing, language processing, where you can type in, show me anyone wearing a green shirt in the last week, and it pulls up all the footage from all the different cameras and basically can show you a narrative where they walked from here to there to here to there. That can help when you're doing some incident management.
I would say one other thing I did not mention. They're on the market right now, and I'm seeing it more and more, is the connection of CCTV to your access control. So the transactions, so you can say who came in at the store on Monday at 2 o'clock, and then it will tie the camera to that exact door transaction of it being open. So that's something that we're actually exploring on certain properties where we find that might be beneficial instead of looking to see who entered and then finding that time transaction, then going back over to your CCTV and finding that time transaction. They actually can link in the software now. We'll
probably talk about on Thursday when we talk about Gen Z, but that whole generation has a lot of different perspectives on privacy than what we do. As long as that, our generation might consider violation of privacy, if it adds value, they're all for it. And example can be that, not too few future, we're talking about credentials and not even needing to have a code or not even having a phone. It's that I want cameras on my property that's just going to facial recognize and unlock the door for me, and that's what they want. So it's out there.
Absolutely. How much time do we have?
We're doing good.
Okay.
About 10 minutes left. Okay. So any other exciters that you would identify in the security category?
I would say the exciters are probably just the innovations around the CCTV and what it's capable of doing. There's some pretty cool stuff there.
Yeah. Okay. Now we'll go kind of into the heart of this diagram and look at both the operating system, which is the blue cloud, and the property management system, which is the cube.
Right, so everyone is going to have a property management system, whether you're in the top 3 or using something different. And then you'll hear me talk about smart building operating system. Here are a few examples. I could probably give you a top 10 list. There are more and more players coming into this space. But this is where it plays back into what I said earlier about it's all about integration. Every single company on here has their integrations that they currently work with. Most of these are going to work with Yardi, Entrata, and RealPage. Some might be new on the market and they're working on that integration, but I really haven't found many in the top 10 that don't have at least the top 3 property management integrations. And again, this goes back to one database. You need that smart building operating system to talk to your property management. So you don't want to create a separate database for your IoT and your smart devices. You need that integration. Now, integration is a tricky word. You need to ask questions about that. You could have a simple database integration of just a resident name. or maybe that integration can tie into your management and your work orders from residents. Perhaps the integration includes resident communication portals, payment portals. So there's all different levels of integration. Integration is not equal, so it's a tricky word. So those are the questions that you need to ask when you're talking to these smart building operating systems. First of all, most companies have a preferred property management system, and so you can start with that. Hey, do you integrate with this? Okay. At what level do you integrate? Obviously, a basic is the database. What other features from the property management software do you integrate with, and find out what that looks like? And usually, they might be like, we're working on this. We're going to have a work order process maybe in 6 more months or 3 months from now, and get kind of that outlook. Don't be surprised if it's all the bells and whistles aren't there. All of these companies, even though there's several of these companies that have been around for several years, like SmartRent, to me, this space is so very new. And even what I've seen in the last 12 months alone, there is so much investment and capital that have been put into these companies, and they are doing some really cool stuff. So it's almost like a whole new world out there. Really what companies like us are expecting them to do. They've been challenged to kind of step up and do some really cool things. So integration is really important. From there, property management is your first question. You need to make sure the smart operating system works with your property management. From there, access control being my priority, I then find out what hardware do you integrate with. Is it Yardi? Oh, sorry, is it Yale? Is it Schlage? Is it Dormakaba? Is it Salto? Is it Brevo? Find out what unit locks and what common area access they integrate with, because those are our foundation. So that's where the conversation starts. Property management software, access control, and then everything else. I would say the next question I ask them to vet what works best for us would be smart thermostats. Almost everybody out there is going to integrate with a Honeywell product. They're probably the biggest on the market in this space. You've got fancy ones like Nest and Ecobee and things like that. I think Ecobee just started charging fees maybe. I'm hearing some feedback on that integration. My asset management department loves Nest because it's shiny and pretty. Honeywell has a nice white version. The T5 has a black version that looks a little classier because it's just in a black and looks shiny, and so we do mostly Honeywell. Every now and then I have an asset manager that may want to do a Nest, but again, you need to find out from the software company who they integrate with. Those are kind of probably my top 3 vetting of smart operating systems, and then find out what are the next things that they're working on? Do they work with water sensors? Do they work with smart water meters? Some of them already integrate with like the LG appliances. Some of them, like Point Central, Alarm.com products, obviously integrate with the alarm products. So everyone kind of comes from a different space. Some focus on alarms, some focus on access control, some focus on,
They're all kind of meeting in the middle.
They are. Their founders kind of come from different areas of the industries, and they all kind of came together. But I think they're all getting to the center point, but some may specialize in certain integrations more than others.
So obviously, over the next 48 hours, you'll have an opportunity to interact on the show floor with many of these companies that are here. I will point out that the last session on Thursday, the afternoon session, when we're talking about a connected community, that session is sponsored by SmartRent, and we'll have their VP of sales that will be here if he's not in the room today. But he will be there, and we can grill him with some questions as part of that discussion as well. But it certainly seems to be an evolving market.
Yes.
And consolidating in the sense of trying to find all these different features and trying to pull them in and get them to play nice with each other, because as we kind of started off with, the complications, the heartache of having multiple systems that you have to duplicate data entry when you're onboarding a resident, or with the example of an access control and then pulling the CCTV, that you've got these disparate systems, that there are natural, logical use cases throughout the day where it sure would be nice if those 2 systems could talk to each other.
Yeah. I'll make one more point. When it comes to the smart operating systems, there are probably 3 or 4 different ways for them to operate. We started last year doing bulk Wi-Fi. And so we can create our own network infrastructure from the ground up. There are a lot of cool products like SmartRent offers, and a lot of these products have hub-based systems where they basically, you buy a hub and you put one in each unit, and it brings that network to the unit and the community. So those are also questions that you need to ask. The hub system is great for retrofits because you don't want to go, throwing down fiber down hallways and doing bulk Wi-Fi last minute. New construction, I support bulk Wi-Fi all day long. That's a very big space. I actually came from a broadband summit last week in Houston. It's a really fun space. If you're doing new construction, I encourage you to really look into bulk Wi-Fi. We even pay, there's all kinds of structures out there, but we're basically we're building Wi-Fi internet into our rent for market rate, and we charge roughly $50 or so a month. So that's a huge revenue generation, huge asset value add for us. We're even controlling right now, I'm looking at different options, but we're currently paying for the infrastructure to bring that fiber into the building, and it's not cheap. You could run anywhere from, on our properties, $230,000 to $400,000, depending on the infrastructure that you have, how many buildings. But the numbers that we're running right now, we're over a 50% IRR on that revenue. So it's completely a no-brainer for us to do the bulk Wi-Fi infrastructure. But retrofits don't always have that option. So there are products out there, like a few of these that you have on your screen, that have a hub base and bring the network with them. Create it either through cellular or another Wi-Fi, or there's even radio frequency ones out there. There's a little bit of everything in that market.
Excellent. Well, I think that gets us to, kind of wraps up the ecosystem. Everyone join me for a round of applause for Lisa.